Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Face to Face. My name is Godfred Akwito Boafo. It's Heritage Month here on City FM, and so today I've chosen to discuss a topic that we all used to take for granted, the independence of Ghana. Now, it's become a politically very sensitive topic, with parliamentarians even walking out over the new holiday amendments bill. So, my topic today is the independence of Ghana, founder or founders. And to help me have that conversation, I've brought in a young man who has dedicated his life to research on this particular topic. He's somebody who is no stranger to the listeners of 97.3 City FM, but definitely a new face on City TV. My guest today is Kwaku Darko Ankrah, a historian and an affiliate of the Institute of African Studies. Kwaku, hello and welcome to City TV.
Thank you.
Kwaku, so I know we've broken the independence of Ghana into phases.
Yeah.
Where do we start from if we want to have this conversation properly?
We have the cultural nationalism, we have the protest nationalism, and we have the radical nationalism.
So let's start from the cultural nationalism.
Yeah, when we talk about cultural nationalism, we're talking about the period where the agenda for identifying ourselves as Gold Coasters, who we are, what we intend to achieve, whether we know where we are coming from and the agenda to move forward. So to put it within the right perspective, Gold Coast as a territory was something that was formed in 1874. As you know, it started with the first agenda of the colonialists coming to the Gold Coast around 1471, where they landed in Yabio, and then they started the trading agenda. For the trading, we first have the Portuguese coming in that period, followed by the Danes, followed by the Dutch. Even the Swedes came in Sweden. They built the Cape Coast Castle. So they were also here. So by 1850, the Danes have sold their properties to the British in some parts. Then in 1844, the British went into certain agreement with 8 Fanti chiefs, which is called the Bond of 1844. The bond itself was interested because it is just a 3-page sentence thing. The first one is talking about doing away with certain barbarous customs. The other is also a protection of the Fanti people against Ashanti hegemonic invention into the coast, because the southern states have had a sort of some wars that the Ashantis have invading into the coast. Then the other one is also to ensure that the British will have certain jurisdiction, but this jurisdiction is within Her Majesty's castles and forts. It will not move forward. So that was the agenda. So the 8 Fanti chiefs, apparently these Fanti chiefs have gone to meet Commander Hill to ask about the interpretation around the abolition of the slave trade. And when they went there, they were cornered by this Commander Hill that before you even do the interpretation, he wants them to sign a piece of agreement. And that agreement was the 3-page thing I talk about.
So this was done even under false pretenses?
Yeah, because the people couldn't sit down to read, which is basically some of the things we see nowadays about how we pass our laws and regulations in this country without giving full opportunity to the representatives, because the chiefs are representatives of the people. They should have even taken the document and bring it back to their people for them to even deliberate on it before they sign. Whichever way it is, history has passed. They sat there and they passed, they accepted and signed. Following the 1844, the British continued to sign series of agreements from there into about 16 to 18 chiefs. Okay? Then, as a result of this, they move on. Then in 1873, through Foreign Jurisdiction Act, they came with a new order in council. And then by 1874, they established the Gold Coast Colony in 1874, which tentatively put Gold Coast as an official colony of the British. So that is how it started. Following this agreement, or this Gold Coast becoming a territory of the British alone, what happened was that now there were a series of events that were occurring that the Gold Coasters became aware that they need to strive for who they are, because they were losing their identity. Mind you, some have even changed their local names into anglicized forms. The education itself was all about European education without any content of the local education. So people don't know about themselves. So there was an agenda for whether the people would want to be who they are or go into the British way.
Were there any people who were leading this agenda?
Yeah. Prior to that, even the 1873, historically, the British had attempted to leave the coast in 1863. So there was a parliamentary select committee in Britain around 1865, of which the chief of Cape Coast sent a delegation to go and observe. And he sent the guys were Martin and Carr. And when they returned, they told the chief that indeed the British wanted to move away. So even when, within that period, we saw in 1868, even prior to 1873, formation of Ghana becoming a Gold Coast, we saw a formation of Fanti Confederation. The Fanti Confederation was an agenda which they think that if the British leave per the 1865 Parliamentary Select Committee proposal, then the Fantis were preparing themselves to take over the leadership of the coast. So that is how come the Fanti Confederation came. And they have a very wonderful agenda of development, even girls' education, talking about establishment of schools and education. So one of their consultants, John Bill, Africanus John Bill, was talking about establishment even of university at that time because they have had education. So he pleaded with the British that there will be the need for that. Apart from that, the Fanti chiefs were also getting ready. So we have the chiefs, president, what have you. Then the educated elites also decided to get themselves involved. So the British were a little bit, they were alarmed. So the governor at the time, Pope Hennessy, he tried to, stop what the Fanti chiefs were doing. So some of them were locked and what have you. So people like George Hughes, Emisa and Co., who were the forces behind all this agenda, decided to, tone down, including FCF Grant, they toned down. And then in 1873, the British quickly brought in the independence, as I stated. So this caused the chief of Cape Coast, Joe Aggrey, to even come out and state that, as for him, he doesn't respect that because the bond of 1844, it doesn't give authority to the British to establish their jurisdiction beyond the confines of their castles, because per the 1844, it is within where Her Majesty's castles and the canons are pointing. So he decided to take his own dues from the people. Unfortunately, the other Fanti chiefs did not support him. So British found a way, got rid of him, and sent him to exile in Lagos. Okay? So after all this thing, it's prepared the ground for the colonial elites to come out to, even after the formation of the Gold Coast, to move toward agenda of trying to come together and fight for their rights. And that set in what we call the cultural nationalism.
Okay.
So in 1888, thereabouts, there was something they formed called Fanti Amembu Feku. Okay, you have J.D. Abraham, Hatton Brew, you have Saba himself, Atahoma, who used to be called SRB Solomon, and Co. They came together and formed the Fanti Amembu Feku to think about how to inculcate the rights, the culture of the people, and how best they can imbibe it. So the Fanti Amembu Feku also came out with what is called Gun Fanti movement. It's back to nativity. That was the agenda. That they have followed European way of doing things for far too long. They wear European dress. They speak like white people. Everything they do is about the European. What about their own local content? How do they appropriate the values that they grew up in? So they started to talk about that agenda. And so when the formation of Aborigines Right Protection Society came, they put it as one of the agenda that fueled the Aborigines Right Protection Society. So that period where the agenda to discuss our culture, our upbringing, our way of doing things is what we called the cultural nationalism. And one of the full advocates of this thing is J.B. Anaman and Ato Ahoma, who moved forward. In fact, some of them were priests. In the churches, they decided that they can no longer sing hymns alone. So they started coming out with translation of some of the hymns into Fanti languages. Andaman even moved further that even the preaching in English language should be stopped and they should preach in Fante language. People should begin to wear their dress. So Aborigines Right Protection Society's conference of 1898, they made it obligatory that every member should wear African wear. And so it was done. And this was reported in the Gold Coast Leader. And all these are there. So they started appropriating the African value and culture. Kofi Asam, who used to be called Thomas Penny, even changed his name to Kofi Asam. And he was that the Gold Coast education is not good for the African, because the African can even speak by rote the history of the European, how England was invaded in, let's say, 1066 by the Normans. It is at the back of that, but they can't even talk about how their own country, where they came from and what have you. So the newspaper became an agency for which they started talking about their African history and where they come from.
Did this particular cultural nationalism catch fire on the coast?
Yeah, it
did people support it?
Yeah, they really supported it, and that is why we see it in the way people dress, the kind of education that came, because they did not only talk, but they walked their talk. So they started even opening school. We will talk about the Fanti Education Board and what have you, where we have W.E. Sam and co. pushing in much money, ensuring that the chiefs up to Wasa were all bringing in money to open schools where they can inculcate the idea of our Africanness, our idea of our collective people as either Fantis, Assam, Acham, or Wasa, who were all within the group.
Now, you mentioned the Aborigines Rights Protection Society. Does it fall under cultural nationalism, or it's a hybrid of cultural nationalism and the later phase of it as we entered protest nationalism?
It is a product of cultural nationalism. Aborigines Rights Protection Society is the product of cultural nationalism, because within that context, then something very important occurred within the Gold Coast. When we talk about the issue of land is the people in Gold Coast. The land is owned by the people. The land is also, when you go to towns, it is owned by the town chiefs, with paramount chiefs just serving as custodians. But the land actually was owned by the people and the community in general, in that form. Then in 1894, they brought a bill called Crown Land Bill of 1894. The bill purports that every land in Gold Coast, which is not settled on by individual, they call it wasteland. And the British were using the legal principle of terrace neros, that a thing without owner. So any settlement that people are not settled on, that land automatically belongs to the crown. And they wanted to introduce that bill in Gold Coast, that any land that is not settled on is owned by the Queen of England. This actually incensed the Gold Coast elites who were in the Infantia Membufeku and the, how do you call it, 8 other organizations that preceded it. So what they decided is that they came together and they formed an organization called Aborigines Right Protection Society, ARPS. So they launched what we call the protest nationalism.
Okay, so now we've entered that phase.
Very good.
Okay, move on.
So what happened was that when they came out with that, they protested against the Land Bill of 1894. So in 1897, the group member, then led by their president, Jacob Wilson Say, Francisco de Mkwabeni, and then Jomesa Saba, J.E. Kesley Hayford, T.F.E. Jones, Emisa, and the rest, they came together that they want to go and fight against this obnoxious Land Bill of 1894. So Jacob Wilson Say, out of his own pocket, bought a ship. Okay?
And he bought a ship?
He bought a ship on his own that, hey, go to England.
He was a wealthy merchant.
He's the first millionaire we have in Gold Coast, apparently, in Gold Coast. So he gave out his ship. Then they traveled to England. Then they went to meet F. Hunt, who was a lawyer in England. Then he led this Gold Coast delegation led by T.F.E. Jones, Emisa, and the rest. And then they went to the British House of Lords, which is their Supreme Court. They went to make their case, and they won the case that the Crown has no right to appropriate every land that he has listed as wasteland. For they argue that in Africa, if a land is there and no one is settled on, all what you need to do is to go to the land and start use the land. The owner will come and meet you. And that is a fact. So through these arguments and what have you, they won their case and then they came back. So that laid the foundation for the protest nationalism. Then in 1905, 1910, they came out with another law, Crown Forest Bill, that any forest land, now they move from wasteland to forest land, that any forest that is there and the owner cannot be identified, that one also belongs to the Queen of England. This also incensed the Aboriginal Right Protection Society again, and so they moved to England again, and they went there, argued their case, and won the case again for the Gold Coast. For some people, they see the emergence of Aboriginal Right Society and their ability to win the land for the Gold Coast people as the first important independence for the Gold Coast people. Because if you compare this to East Africa, where the colonial estate project took roots, you realize that the Africans were disenfranchised of their own, they were alienated from their own land. Land was taken from the Africans. And later they become rather laborers on their own land. As we see it in Kenya, we see it in South Africa, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. So you see how the tenor of their political struggle actually, the kind of method that it takes, they have to fight and drive people away to repossess their land. Okay. So our forefathers fought very well using the law because they were well versed and trained in law. Okay? As far back at 1860, when they were looking for somebody to negotiate for the passing of the Dutch possessions into the British, they could not find no lawyer except one Gold Coaster, Emil Emisang from Elmina. He was the one who was well vested in commercial laws and measures. So he was the one who actually signed and did everything for the Dutch to pass their possessions to the British. So there was a history of Gold Coasters who have, training in law. Okay, even before we have our first qualified lawyer from Britain, which is John Mensah Saba. Okay, so these people were able to use the Constitution to, or the bills and the ordinances to argue their case and then to defeat the British in their own turf, as it is. So what happened was that after the Aboriginal Right Protection Society, there was also an agenda that if you have to get our independence, there must be inter-West African coalition that can come together to fight, because one territory alone cannot do that. Okay. And this led to the formation of what we call National Congress for British West Africa, NCWA, which had J.E. Kesley-Ford as a president or leader and others. So what happened was that they met in Ghana here from 1919 to 1920, and the argument was that if they want to have influence in the Legislative Council, then they have to fight for the rights of the Africans to be represented in the Legislative Council instead of the chiefs. Because the chiefs, per the Native Jurisdiction Ordinance of 1888, has given rise to the Gold Coast chiefs to be seen as part of the colonial agenda. Because under the indirect rule, the British were ruling the people through the chiefs. So the chiefs are seen as people who are being co-opted into the British colonial project in Africa. So therefore, they cannot speak for the right of the people. Secondly, as long as they are ruling as a co-trustees within the framework of indirect rule, they cannot also agitate for self-rule for the people. So then, the right to do that is for the intelligentsia or the emerging elites to appropriate or go into the Legislative Council to speak as the proper representative for the people. Okay. So this led to skirmishes between the Gold Coast elites and then the chiefs led by Nanase Oforiatta. So when the National Congress for British West Africa was sending their delegation to Britain in 1922, so Oforiatta sent a message that they don't represent the Gold Coast people. The Gold Coast people are represented by the chiefs. Nana Oforiatta was right. This was a contestation between the new elites and the chiefs who, since time immemorial, had been the representative of the people.
Okay.
So these things happened. So National Congress for British West Africa went to England in 1922 and they were not seen. And this brought a very serious confrontation between J.E. Kesley Hayford and Nanase Ofori-Atta. They were not even talking until 1928.
Wow.
When Kwaku Darko brokered the peace between the two of them before they came together again. So from there, in 1922, thereabouts to 24, there was a need to introduce what we call Municipal Cooperation Bill. That was to ensure that some municipal areas in Ghana also sent representatives to the Legislative Council. That is Western Province, then Central Province, and the Greater Accra, which we call the Eastern Province. And then the municipal area were Sekondi Takoradi, Cape Coast, and Accra. So there was the need to introduce the people into, and there was a lot of argument about it. So a man called A.W. Kojo Thompson, Augustus William Kojo Thompson, who was from Accra, formed a party called Gamambi Party.
Gamambi.
Gamambi
Is it the same
Party.
Kojo Thompson Road?
That is the man named after Kojo Thompson Road. The first man to introduce radical politics in Ghana. He was arguing that for him, he doesn't even want to see white people, and he wished mosquitoes have even dealt with them. But unfortunately, they have come out with quinine, and now they are still ruling the Gold Coasters. And this could be found in the Gold Coast Legislative Council reports. So Kojo Thompson apparently was against the bill that if they want to elect people even into it was only people who have property that can vote. At that time, it's not everybody that can vote. People who pay property rates had the right. And Kojo Thompson was against the kind of property rate people should have before they can vote. He wanted this to be lowered. Again, he wanted the representation of the Africans instead of the chiefs. So he came out with that, and he forced access free, and the Municipal Corporation Bill was thrown away and then reintroduced again in 1927 by Governor Guggisberg. So that is how Kojo Thompson contributed towards even nationalism with his Gamambi Party. Then towards the when the law was finally accepted and Guggisberg passed it, a new political institution was also actually born in Accra, which is called Ratepayers Association, which was led by Dr. Frederick Victor Nanka Bruce. Victor Nanka Bruce is a second person to be trained in medicine in the entire Gold Coast. Okay, sorry, third. He's the third person after Dr. Kote Pepperfield and Ernest Hayford. So he's the third person. And he has his own newspaper, and in fact, a very wealthy person. The British colonial reports describe him as the most best dressed man in the entire Gold Coast. Always with flower tacked to his pockets. So he was very popular. And he founded this Ratepayers Party with a man, with Akila Pasoya. Okay, Professor Akila Pasoya's ancestor. Yeah, Akila Pasoya was there, and a man called John Grover Addo. These were the major proponents of the Ratepayers Association. So in Accra, they contested the election, and John Grover Addo won the election. Then in Sekondi, J.E. Kesley Hayford also contested and won it in the. But I Cape Coast says no, because Aboriginal Right Protection Society, they don't want to have anything to do with the British. All what they want is they want the independent. They want everything to be given to them. So they decided they won't contest. As a result, some of the members who were peeved with this intransigent behavior of the Kobnesechi, who was then the leading proponent and has taken this stand, some of them decided to cross carpet. So Kwaku Darko cross carpeted from the Aboriginal Right Protection Society and went to Ratepayers Association and contested in Cape Coast and won the seat in 1928. So these were all period of national, what we call protest.
So hold on, Kwaku Darko. The conversation is getting interesting. I don't want you to give away all the information in the first part. I hope you're enjoying our conversation on the independence movement of Ghana as we build up on City FM and City TV's Heritage Month. You're watching Face to Face, and my guest today is historian and an affiliate of the Institute of African Studies, Kwaku Darko Ankrah. We'll be right back.
Keep watching Breakfast Daily on City TV.
You're tuned into Breakfast Daily on City TV.
You're watching Breakfast Daily on City TV.
We spice up your mornings with culturally enriched conversations, social interviews, and policy-oriented discussions that will keep you updated on the progress of the nation. Let your voice be heard with the hashtag Breakfast Daily.
Nigerians are putting their film on Netflix now. There's DSTV, there's mobile phones, there's all sorts of apps that you can actually put your phone. So distribution is not just going to the cinemas to preview or to premiere the movie. We wear all our gowns and all that, and then that's all. There are lots of channels that we don't know, and we've limited ourselves to just Ghana.
Join us for Breakfast Daily, only on City TV. Join the Breakfast Daily team Monday through Fridays from 7:30 a.m. to 10.
Tune in to The Point of View, Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. as Bernard Avlet takes the news further. He will bring the right guests, ask them the relevant questions, and get you the real insights you need on the big stories for the day.
And what we are doing in the end is, well, I want to vote. I knew 5 years ago whom I'll vote for. But since you are going to ask me and I have to find some nice way to explain it, I'll identify one or two things in my opponent's column, and I'll tell you that is the reason why I'm voting, because I don't like that.
The Point of View with Bernard Avlet, Monday and Wednesday nights, only on City TV.
Spend 30 minutes every weekday catching up with all the trending social media conversations of the day. If you tweet it, we'll read it. We might just even Skype you. 30 minutes is all it takes, so use the hashtag 30minutes on social media to catch our attention. Join the most interactive social media TV show weekdays at 5 p.m. only on City TV.
Welcome back to Face with historian Kwaku Darko Ankrah. So Kwaku, here we are in the middle of protest nationalism. People were crossing carpets like you had told us in order to stake a claim to the independence struggle in the various metropolitan areas of the Gold Coast. Where did UGC come into all of this?
Before that, most of the agenda within the protest nationalism is to protest against certain obnoxious laws, laws that were inimical to the interest of the Gold Coast people. And most of these laws apparently favors the chiefs. And sometimes it also affects the well-being. So we see in certain instances, the chiefs and the intelligentsia will come together. If you look when they introduced the Native Administration Act of 1927, the Gold Coast intelligentsia fought against it because these were things that was giving values to the chiefs, even creating chiefs courts and what have you, and giving it power. For this, the intelligentsia didn't actually like it because we're moving towards a new phase of modernized states, so where professionals will participate and do things. And also the expansion of the Native Jurisdiction Act, which gives more powers, because if you expand it, it means while you are giving the chiefs court, you are expanding the power base of the chiefs. Water in 1934, when they introduced the Sedition Act as well as the Water Rate Act, which water rate bills, which were actually inimical to the interests of the people, because for the first time in Gold Coast, the Gold Coasters were being asked to pay for the water they drink, which was something that had never occurred before. and they were being asked. Certain new bills were being introduced on taxation, and they found it very hard to, stay with that kind of bills that out of blues, because Governor Shenton before the new governor who introduced it has promised that such a thing will not happen, because they take taxes from the people, so they expect that their taxes should be used to produce the water that they drink. Again, the sedition bill for the first time is talking about the fact that everything that you publish sometimes should be screened by the governor, because certain people have come to the country and they were introducing radical form of newspaper reporting, and the bill was specifically targeted against A.W. Kojo Thompson, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and I.T. Wallace Johnson, who have come in, and then they were operating the famous Adan Richman, A.J. Okansi's newspaper, African Morning Post. And they were using this post to actually critique the British colonial administration heavily. Okay, so they came in with this law, and they were even suspecting them of being communists and what have you. So as a result of this, for the first time, you saw the Gold Coast intelligentsia and then the traditional chiefs coming together, sending delegation to England to protest against the 1934 Sedition and Water Rate Bill. Unfortunately, they couldn't succeed. So from that period going in, we saw formation of what is called Gold Coast Youth Conferences, which was a baby of J.B. Dankwa.
He had entered the picture by then?
Yes. So he introduced, he called all the Gold Coast intelligentsia to come together, judge about the problems of the Gold Coast and how to come out with alternative solutions, which they will be given to the governor. So this thing took place from apparently it started from 1926. When we get to the women's side, I will take it from there far better. So these were all going on. Then around 1946 going, a man called Chris Teston has a friend, and his friend was Edward Akufo-Addo. They were also contemplating that the way things have gone on, there's a need to form a political party. But that was still born. And then J.B. Dankwa went to see a merchant called Alfred Grant in Takoradi, and decided the things that has occurred, the kind of innovation they wanted to see in the Alambans Constitution of 1946, it couldn't do that, because they have also said a counter proposal, which they were expecting that the Legislative Council should be empowered and the African members should be given much powers within it. But that power, Dankwa, according to Dankwa, he didn't see it. They have rather make them just what we call like a two-fledged bulldog within the Legislative Council, because the power to veto and what have you still belong to the European appointees and European members. So he decided that there's a need to do something about it. And if you look at Alambans Constitution, what it did was that for the first time in the history of Gold Coast, it brought Ashanti into a legislative unity with Gold Coast, because in the times past, Ashanti used to have its own laws different from the Gold Coast colony. So for the first time, the Ashanti members were also brought in. That was the achievement of the Alambans Constitution, ensuring the legislative unity. And even this one, Dankwa states that it's because of what the JCYC, Gold Coast Youth Council, did. The alternative proposal that they sent, which according to him was taken by Barnes and put it into his constitution. So the 46 bands did not even bring the Northern Territory into its purview. And that is why they describe it as outmoded at birth, because what was not far-reaching. And out of these weaknesses within the Barnes Constitution, Dankwa went to see Alfred Grant, and then the idea of putting up a political party became a reality, which we saw in August 4, 1947 at Kenyon Lodge in Salt Pond. So all the Gold Coast elites and intelligentsia met at that place in Salt Pond, and the UGCC was born with their motto, independence within a shortest possible time.
And who were some of the key members, and what was their agenda?
The key members, we have Francis Awono Williams, we have J.B. Dankwa, Edward Akufo-Addo, Obeche Belamte, Apalu, we have old men like Samson, you have the Graf Johnsons, and so on. They were quite a lot In fact, that assembly will say like it was like creme de la creme of the Gold Coast intelligentsia that actually met at Canaan Lodge in South Pond. And that period ushers in what we call radical nationalism.
Let's move on from there. Radical nationalism. How did the formation of the UGCC with all these big names that you have mentioned of Gold Coast politics change the face of politics in this town?
Thank you. What it did was that for the first time, we had a mass political party, which even though Northern Territories was about within the confines of the Ashanti Gold Coast territory, which has the support of basically all the intelligentsia coming together. And it is also the first political party with a clear-cut view talking about independence as an agenda. It was a move and a far move from what the protest nationalists were doing. They were protesting against certain obnoxious laws that affect them. But UGCC is looking forward towards achieving self-rule. And that was a critical difference. That is why we say it ushered into the radical nationalism. However, their own modus operandi was also a little bit elitist in nature. Okay, because these were a group of people. Some of them were even friends with the governor. Some of them were members of the Freemasons. Some of them were even have like tennis ball playing friends and what have you with the governor. They were members of Rogers Club in Accra here, which is around, I've forgotten, around this very lane on where we have the city house. That's where it used to be. And all these people, they go there and they meet members of the club. How can they, apparently fight against somebody who is your friend? And this was affecting the performance of the UGCC. And if you read the Watson Committee report, this is carefully laid down there. As a result, they needed somebody who can do a full-time job, because some of them were lawyers. They have to go to court. They have to eat. So they need somebody who can come and do full-time job as a general secretary. So the general secretary then at that time was DeGraff Johnson. Okay. So Akwaje in a meeting with the UGC members said, he knew a young man in England who is very, very, very radical, and he think he can bring changes into the position of the general secretary. As a result, they sent money to Nkrumah, inviting him to Gold Coast, and he came to join the UGCC.
Was there no opposition to bringing in Nkrumah at that point?
Because historically they know Nkrumah. At 1947, when they were founding the UGCC, DeGraff Johnson read the paper that one of our members who is outside the country, Francis Nkrumah, also sends his felicitation to this August function. This shows you that back in the day, even in the formation of the UGC 1947, Nkrumah was really even recognized at that time as a distant member.
Okay.
This could be found in Gold Coast Leader of 1947. Okay, so there are evidences. Our history actually need to be interrogated deeply. There are bits that have not been incorporated. Okay. So what I'm saying is that Nkrumah was invited, and he started introducing energy into the UGCC.
Did he arrive in the same year?
Yeah, when he was invited after some time.
Okay.
So when he came in, he started invigorating the UGCC. And series of events were also happening.
But hold on. When you say invigorate, what did he come and do differently?
What I'm saying is that he opened more branches, bringing in more youths, because you see, these were elite, big town guys, and Nkrumah was an ordinary, people's people. That's what I would say. So he was able to bring the youth, the youth council, the youth organizations, what we call the CYOs and rest. He brought them in. That's why we have young people like Saki Sheikhs and what have you coming in to invigorate the CPP, UGCC. So at that time, all what the Gold Coast people know was UGCC.
Okay.
Then the issue of whether the party should support the positive action, which was what was started by, we have the 1948, the veterans who were unhappy about their living condition, marching to meet the Christian Council to actually put their grievances across, where they were shot by Major Emre in that crossfire. And we have the Sergeant Tajete Obeche Belamte and Kopra Tipo dying in that instance. And we also have the issue of the swelling shoot diseases, which has affected a lot of cocoa. And you know the mainstay of this country was cocoa then and even now. Okay? So most of the farmers and the people were agitated. Then New Kopnabani has also come out with his agenda of that we should boycott all the European goods because they have come together and found what is called Association of West African Merchants, AWAM. And he said through that they are doing AWAM against Ghanaians. That is why we have the term AWAM, because of these foreign companies, Lebanese, and then the Syrians and what have you have come together, and then they were coming out with exorbitant prices that the Gold Coasters cannot pay. So when the positive action was declared, some of the UGCC members got themselves involved. Okay? And the manner that the protest went, some of the shops were looted. And that led to the setting up of the Western Commission.
Hold on the Western Commission for me. Darko Ankrah. Face to face. We'll be right back.
Regular news checks as they unfold. 2020 news all day, all the time. Politics, sports, entertainment, business, and more. 2020 news. We bring you the world in 20 minutes. Witness the twisted and tangled story of betrayal, greed, vengeance, and love in the award-winning Brazil Avenue. Carminia, a woman led by greed, gets rid of her husband, who is Rita's father, and sends Rita away to a filthy landfill. Rita finds love in Batata, but they are soon separated by adoption into different families, far away from each other. Many years later, all paths cross again, as Rita, now a renowned chef, seeks to pay back her stepmother for taking away her happiness as a child. It's the story of twists, turns, suspense, and thrilling action in Brazil Avenue. Brazil Avenue airs Wednesdays to Fridays from 10 to 11 p.m. only on City TV. Every weekday at 8 p.m., City Newsroom brings you analysis of the major news stories of the day. In-depth, comprehensive, and researched. It's 1 hour of local and international news from 8 to 9 p.m. It's the City Newsroom. Weekdays on City TV.
Welcome back to Face as we enter the final hurdle of our time warp through Ghana's independence battle. And I hope you're enjoying the conversation as much as I am with Kwaku Darko Ankrah. So, Kwaku, we had the UGCC. Kwame Nkrumah had come and invigorated it. Why was there a split that led to the formation of the CPP?
Yeah, it was his Nkrumah's approach of doing things. You know, it was too radical. Mind you,
but they wanted the radical.
But the approach of antagonizing the colonial authorities, you see, Nkrumah wanted everything fast. You see the thing? And you could understand why, because Nkrumah have stayed in America and have seen the color, how the color bar and the way the whites treat the African Americans there. He has suffered it as a person. So, and he has got himself involved in the organization of the Manchester Conference of 1945, the 5th Pan-African Congress. And as a result, Nkrumah had a lot of experiences from people who were very radical. And those people who were there, like Hastings Banza, Uhuru Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta, have also gotten that agenda. And you could see how all those people ended up becoming presidents of their country. So Nkrumah had that experience. And that sort of radicalism and confrontation with the colonial authorities, as well as within some members of the party, created a sort of wedge between him and the people. And as a result, Nkrumah had to go away, and he founded his Convention People's Party. And that led to the renewed agenda and invigoration of the kind of nationalism that took place. So we see it as that it has taken a different route. And when he founded his party, you could see the mindset of Nkrumah right from why he will have problems with the UGCC. He calls his motto, self-government now. So it means he wanted it now. Okay? And this was at a time that there was a massive idea and cries from people towards independence. And we see that in Nkrumah's attitude and mass organization. Okay? And that forced us to, by 1950, Kuse Constitutional Committee talk about the creation of the, Legislative Assembly. We used to have Legislative Council. So 1951, it was accepted. And 1952, we had our first elections. So 1952 elections, we have the Convention's People's Party, which was led by Nkrumah himself. UGCC was led by J.B. Dankwa himself. And then another party, which is called National Democratic Party, NDP, or DOMOS for short. And he has the best of the brains too, like Komoeduma Bosman, Olenu, as well as their leader, F.V. Nankablus. So Nankablus contested the election, the three political parties, and Nkrumah won. So in 52, when Nkrumah won, he becomes the leader of government business, or ipso facto prime minister. And he started ruling. So from 52, in 1954, there was a renewed energy for elections again in 54. And this time the political parties increased. We have Muslim Association Party, which was from the Muslim communities. And their presidential candidate was Kwaku Darko Ankrah Rena, who is from Elmina. And because he wanted us to contest and what have you, we changed his name to Mustafa Rena. Okay, and contested the election. The CPP people used to tease him, Alaji Banza, because they believe he too bad just to contest. Then you have the Togoland Congress Party, okay, which was led by SG Anto. Then you have Ghana Congress Party, which is a division of UGCC was split. So we have Ghana Congress Party, which was headed by Professor K. Buzia. Then you have another UGCC offspring called Ghana National Party, which was headed by Emmanuel Odakwe Ubechebelamte. Then you have Ghana Action Party, which was also headed by Dr. Kumi Asakwe, which was also there. Okay?
So, but it looks like from just quickly, after Nkrumah left, the UGCC had a lot of splinter groups.
Yeah, because these were intelligent, everybody feel to be, egos, people who think they know and what have you.
Okay.
So the parties were divided in this order. And then we have Angola Youth Association, which was led by Modesto Apalu. All these parties contested the elections. And CPP won again, and Nkrumah from 54. So we went to 56. 56 was very critical. This time, the UGCC group have done their homework and they were not contested, but a new political movement emerged from Ashanti region, National Liberation Movement, led by Otumufuo's linguist, Bafo Osiakoto. And his party actually got some of the CPP rebels and people who were not happy within the CPP to come in, like Ara Rampansa, Joe Apia. You have this man who became Attorney General, Victor Usu, and co, all moving into NLM. And as a result, Dankwa and co also joined NLM and what have you. NLM agenda basically was to ensure that during independence, this country become a federal state. Because they could not trust Nkrumah within a unitary state that his power, you may probably take away some of the things that they have within the state. So Ashanti, as an ancient kingdom, wanted to preserve its heritage, its resources, and what have you. And also, they were seeking double or bicameral legislation where chiefs would be represented within the legislative council or assembly. Okay, or the new parliament. They wanted it that way. So this was the agenda the NLM was also fighting for. So they entered into these elections, and then Nkrumah won again in 56.
And that is what basically eventually led to
so from 56
the independence announcement.
Yes, the agenda came so around 18th September 1956. Nkrumah announced to the Legislative Assembly that Ghana is going to be independent. Gold Coast is going to be independence, and the new name is going to be Ghana. So he made that announcement, which is in the front of Daily Graphic of the time. Okay. And then in 1957, Gold Coast was given independence, and we became Ghana.
You've given us a beautiful story. I didn't hear a single woman mentioned. Were there no women?
Thank you very much. Women has always played a prominent role within the nationalism struggle. Even if you go back pre-colonial, there's a woman like Kate Dawson, who was one of the richest women Gold Coast has ever produced. A very intelligent woman who founded what is called Native Ladies of Cape Coast, which was turned to Ladies of Gold Coast, which was an organization. She and Mary Barnes, as well as George King Ferguson's sister Elizabeth Ferguson, came together, and they rounded a lot of women during the invasion of Ashanti. In fact, Kate Dawson decided to even pay for the entire military expedition because the Ashantis have invaded Fanti land in 1806 and they have lost a lot. And the husband was no less a person like Frank Swansea. Frank Swansea's company, F&A Swansea, is what became UAC and what we know today as Unilever.
Wow.
You see? So you see, this woman's money contributed a lot towards that. So they were even involved. She protested against the poll tax ordinance. She protested against the slave trade and what have you in 8 different forms. Okay? But when we talk about the involvement of women, it started in 1926 where the women were no longer playing the ballroom singers, being people who followed their husbands to go. So in 1926, Gold Coast Youth Council, for the first time, we saw a woman, Rubikote Papafio, who was then head of Accra Girls' School, involved among the women. And there were 4 people who spoke in the Gold Coast Youth Council. There were K.A. Akukosan, then we have Komnesechi, okay? And then Dankwa himself and others. And this woman was given opportunity to speak. That ushered the actual role of women coming in. In the 37-38 conference, we have Gladys Kesley Hayford. We have the headmistress of Bufleto, Mrs. Zomelo. Also then we have Mrs. Amatefiu and Co., who all came into
and contributed. All right.
So
unfortunately, Kwaku, time has caught up with us. Just when the story was getting exciting. But thank you so much, Kwaku Darko Ankrah. It's always a pleasure to have you pass through to give us a historical lesson. I hope you've enjoyed the journey through time as we've discovered about Ghana's independence, as we celebrate our Heritage Month on Face to Face. My name is Godfred Akwuto Boafo. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Have a good day.